How life began. The universe is about 4.6 billion years old. The formation of the Earth along with other planets of our solar system is believed to have occurred some 4.5 billion years ago. Life on Earth, however, probably began only between 3.5 and 4.0 billion years ago. The important question is, how was life first formed? Evidence from fossil records show that the oldest fossil resembled the one-celled organism like bacteria. How did life on Earth begin? For some then, the origin of life could be explained by the spontaneous generation theory, which states that life forms can be generated from inanimate objects. This belief had been around since the time of Aristotle. Franchesco R. Similar to Louis Pasteur's spontaneous generation experiment, the 17th-century Italian scientist Franchesco R conducted an experiment to refute the theory of spontaneous generation nearly 200 years earlier. Franchesco R showed that maggots do not spontaneously arise from decaying meat. To prove this, he designed a simple controlled experiment, now referred to as the Rady experiment. Rady placed meat in two identical jars. He left one jar uncovered and allowed flies to come into contact with the meat. He covered the other jar with a cheesecloth or other cloth that allowed air to pass through. Contact with the air allowed the meat to decay, just as the other would. After a short period of time, Rady observed maggots, fly larvae, on the decaying meat of the open jar. There were no maggots on the meat in the covered jar. Rady concluded that the flies laid eggs on the meat in the open jar, which caused the maggots. Because the flies could not lay eggs on the meat in the covered jar, no maggots were produced. Rady therefore proved that decaying meat did not produce maggots. Lazaros Banani. In the late 1700s, Lazaros Banani likewise tried to disprove the spontaneous generation theory by performing a controlled experiment with broth. He put broth into two flasks, glass containers, and sterilized them both by boiling the broth. One of the flasks was left open to the air. The other flask was sealed up to keep out any organisms that might be floating in the air. Microorganisms developed only in the uncovered flask. From this, Spallanzani concluded that, 1. The microorganisms did not come from the broth, but were in the air that entered the flask. 2. Therefore, not even microorganisms came from non-living things. Alexander I Oparin. In 1953, Alexander I Oparin, a Russian scientist, hypothesized that the atmosphere of primitive Earth contained gases like ammonia, methane, hydrogen, and water vapor. He explained that energy of lightning and ultraviolet rays from the sun caused these gases to combine and form chemical compounds. As they mixed with rain and hot seas, they formed complex organic molecules, which was similar to what living things are made of. Stanley I Miller. An American scientist, Stanley I Miller performed an experiment using a mixture of the gases suggested by Oparin. He introduced electrical sparks into the mixture. After a few days, molecules similar to amino acids that are found in all living things were formed. His experiment proved that the first organic molecules could have been formed from the primitive Earth. Living cells may have arisen on early Earth through a series of chemical combinations of these organic compounds. Thank you for watching my video. I hope it helped you understand the lesson. Please hit the like button and subscribe.